This is my very first elk. Took me 4 years of hunting and got him with a bow. Second elk, also archery kill. Third elk, shot with a rifle. I think this one is my sixth elk. The rest, I've literally run out of wall space, and so they're either in the garage or my room upstairs, kind of scattered about the house. Great problem to have. And welcome back to the vlog. So I started bow hunting for elk when I was 15, and I'm 32 now, 17 years of bow hunting elk under the belt. And in that time, I've made a lot of mistakes, also had a few successes. I've managed to take 8 archery bulls, and the plan with this vlog is to share some of my successes, mostly share failures, in hopes that you can learn from my mistakes. Let's jump into it. Let's start off with bull numero uno. First elk right here. 4 years hunting really hard, happened to get him with a bow. Pretty stoked on that. I made a pretty massive mistake though on this bull. So I was 18 years old, and right off the bat, I cut 2 bull tracks in the snow. I trail them for a little ways. They walk right into a really thick patch. I was like, ooh, I bet they're bedded right there. And so I stayed downwind and I looped around and I got basically above the timber patch to where I thought where they might come out. Sure as heck, the bulls come out. They filter by 40 yards and I put a decently placed arrow right behind the shoulder on this guy. What I was unaware of back in my younger years of bow hunting was all the factors that go into what it takes to have an effective hunting arrow. So I was shooting a 70-pound bow, fairly heavy arrow, but I was under the impression that a really, really large cutting diameter on a broadhead was a good thing, because a really large cutting diameter would lead to a bigger hole, which would be more lethal, cause a quicker kill, everything. So all season, I was hunting with a 3-inch expandable turkey broadhead. So what happened when I shot that bull, I shoot him behind the shoulder, a really, really large, I mean, the hole on the side of that thing was this big. Opens right up, he's bleeding bad, runs 80 yards, tips over. I wait 45 minutes, I walk up to that bull. I thought he was completely dead, and I get 10 yards from him. He whips his head around, jumps up, runs off. And I look down, there's my hunting arrow, and my arrow had gone in 6 or 7 inches. And yeah, what followed that, I got in touch with my dad. I was able to call my dad, he came out. We basically blood trailed that thing. We'd blood trail him for about 2 hours. We'd follow him to his bed. I would try to get another shot off, and then we'd spook that bull. We did that for like 24 straight hours. Finally, mid-morning the next day, that bull did expire on his own. It was one of the more heart-wrenching, just awful things to experience, especially on my first archery kill. Clearly, the takeaway there is that penetration is a huge factor in making a lethal hit. Placement's one thing, having a heavy arrow, not having a broadhead that's so stinking wide that it's not gonna like pass through him or go far in. So the broadheads that I'm using now, they're 100 grain slick tricks. I think they have like a 1 1/4 inch cutting diameter. They're a 4-blade, and I have no issues with penetration. A few years later, I was able to take this bull with my bow. He is my biggest bull by a long shot. He scores right at 360 on the dot. It was a rather interesting hunt. So 3 days in a row, I got on this pretty awesome, I think he was a 7x8, and every single day he had 13 cows. I actually missed that bull 3 times. So this was pre-rangefinder days. My first opportunity, I just kind of got into the mix. He was at 30 yards. I put my 40-yard pin on him, took a shot, watched my arrow go right over the top. Next day, same deal, I get into the mix. He's probably at 20 yards, and I put my 30-yard pin on arrow right over the top. The next day, I had to go back to college. I had to go back to town to go to class, but I was just like so determined. I was like, I gotta keep hunting. Like, this is totally worth skipping class. So I skipped class, which later came to bite me in the rear as I actually didn't pass one of those classes. I was trying to intercept this bull and his 13 cows as they were coming out of their bedding area, moving towards their feeding zone. So I happened to just be positioned in the exact correct game trail. All of a sudden, here comes 13 cow elk walking right down this game trail that I'm basically standing right in the middle of. They all walk up to me and they get about a yard away, 3 feet away, and then they filter down and around me. And each of the 13 cows, they pass by at like, I mean, I could have reached out and touched them. In the back of the pack, and actually like 100 yards back, I can just hear this bull just bugling. He is just ripping. All of a sudden, here he comes. He gets about 10 yards from me, and he just sees that there's like this optifade blob just sitting, or just standing right in the middle of the trail. And so instead of just continuing forward, he actually loops down. As soon as his head goes behind a tree, I've already got an arrow nocked. I get my bow drawn not even a quarter of the way, and all of a sudden my bow fires. I was so excited that I drew my bow with my finger on the trigger of my release. That's one thing you just never do. You never draw your bow with your finger on the trigger. So what happened? My arrow flies off, the bull runs about 10 yards and just stops. And he's just looking around, he has no idea what happened. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there stomping my feet and just throwing a hissy fit, when what I should have done, if I would have just maintained my composure, I would have knocked another arrow. That bull was just standing there like looking the other direction, clueless to what was going on. I mean, I bet I had 5 seconds to probably knock an arrow, draw quick, shoot him at 10 yards. He eventually caught on to me throwing that hissy fit and got the heck out of there. So the next day, day 4, I go right back into that same zone, and lo and behold, I find 13 cows and I can hear a bull bugle behind them. I basically intercept these cows as they're traveling between their bedding and their feeding zone. One by one, single file, they just filtered by at probably 20 yards. And then here comes the bull. I can just like hear him moving through the brush, and he's breaking branches and he's like hissing and making these wild noises. And so I draw my bow and this bull comes in, pulled the trigger, like got him, made a really great shot. The woods proceed to erupt with elk. All the 13 cows, they run like due south. The bull whips around and he's like following them, and then within a couple seconds, all the elk are gone. I can't see anything, I can't hear anything. The woods are just silent. So I give it a 45-minute wait before I start looking. I basically spent about 2 hours just working really hard trying to find blood, and I couldn't find anything. Couldn't find blood, couldn't find my arrow. I knew I made a great hit. I saw my arrow go right behind the shoulder. So after about a 2-hour initial search, I was pretty dumbfounded, and I was like, well, maybe he just like didn't bleed, or he's bleeding internally and no blood was coming out. I basically just started grid searching, and I started kind of working out in a bit of a V direction from where I shot. I spent the next 2 days grid searching, doing like 10-yard grids, just going through everything, and I couldn't find anything. That bull had vanished. So I headed home pretty dejected, pretty down and out. I grabbed a buddy, Andrew Crow, and he came back out to the woods. I was like, I just need somebody there to help me grid search and try to find this thing. And right when we got into the woods just, they smelled like death. Something was dead. I knew instantly. I was like, it's the bull, and he's up there somewhere. Somehow I missed him. And so we followed our noses. We walked right up on this bull. Dead as can be, covered in maggots, lost all the meat. He had expired not 80 yards from where I shot him. What had happened, that bull, when I shot him, he ran with his cows due south, and then basically as soon as he got out of view of me, he actually looped back to where he came from. And when I did my grid, I searched everything kind of south, and he just died off to my east. You know, I think I missed him on my grid by 20 yards. Really disappointed that I lost that bull. Never a good feeling. So the learning lesson there, among many, was that elk, when they are mortally hit, they will always run back to the direction where they came from, and they will often run into the thickest, densest cover they can find. I've used that tip to recover a lot of bulls over the years since that bull. It's very common. They will always run back to where they came from, and they will always run to the thickest, densest timber. All right, this guy here is my 3rd archery bull. Really cool bull, big old fighter. The takeaway with this guy is that sometimes elk aren't as far in as you think they are. I was backpack hunting and I just loaded up a bunch of gear, and I was gonna head in like 10 miles. On the way in, I get about 2 miles in, or not even, and I hear a bunch of bugling. And so I dumped my pack, pulled all the stuff out of it, just took a light setup, grabbed my bow, ran in there. I got into a herd of 11 different bulls. They were all bugling at each other. As soon as one would bugle, 10 bugles would follow, and it was just nonstop. There was, I don't know how many cows there were. I probably saw 50 cows. Probably one of the wilder elk hunting days I've ever had. So I just get into the mix. My wind's swirling, the wind's bad, but there's so many elk in there that like it didn't matter. You would spook one animal this way, then a bull would come out this way and push them all back. Just absolute mad chaos. So I'm just trying to get in close to some of these bulls, and all of a sudden I hear a big fight erupt, just antlers clashing. I literally ran as fast as I could. It was probably 200 yards through the woods. I'm bumping elk on the way, but I'm just trying to get in close to this fight. I get probably 50 yards from these two really big bulls fighting. This is this guy and actually a much larger one. All of a sudden, the fight stops. Both bulls split. The real big guy, he runs directly away from me. And then this guy, he runs right at me. And the fight just broke up, and so they each kind of ran in a different direction. And this dude comes running right at me. He's all puffed up, just looks so angry. And he can't see me. He's basically just like standing there looking right through me. As soon as he turned, it's like he turned like he was gonna go head back to the fight. And I drew my bow and shot him at 17 yards. And that one went about as perfect as it could have. Perfect shot with a slick trick broadhead, shooting 70-pound bow, and I think a 430 grain arrow, and complete pass through. He ran 80 yards, tipped over, and died. But the takeaway on that one is that you can plan all day long, and you can plan like, okay, I'm gonna go backpack way into this area and hunt these elk here, but it's like, at the end of the day, the elk dictate where you go. So for my next archery bull, I was hunting during a full moon, and the full moon does some wild stuff to elk, and most animals actually. But when the moon is full, the elk and deer, everything is basically out all night running around. I'd be sleeping in my tent at night, and there would be elk bugling all around. It's like, man, if it was legal, you could I could literally see my pins in the middle of the dark, and like they were actually lit up from the moonlight. You dang near could have hunted elk in the dark. But as a result, the mornings and the evenings hunt was really, really slow. So at this point, it's really late in archery season. I've only got one evening and in the morning left to hunt before I got to get out. And I was actually heading up north to go do a photo assignment up in the Chugach Range in Alaska with friend Adam Foss. So that night, my last evening hunt, the elk just happened to be rutting and like before dark. And I ran up on this. I never got a great look at him, but he had lots of extra points. He was a big bull. He was raking this tree, so he was on the edge of this meadow, and but he was like inside the timber a little bit. And I ran right to the edge of the meadow, and I was like, I can't get any closer. But he's raking a tree just like right there, and I've got this shooting window that's probably 6 inches tall by maybe 3 or 4 inches wide. And the shooting window was at like 10 yards, and the bull, I was ranging the bull was at 40. And I was like, if I can thread an arrow through there, either I'm gonna like hit him perfect, or I'm basically gonna hit a branch and completely miss. I decided to take the shot, took the shot, hit a branch, totally missed. So that night, go to sleep pretty dejected, and the next morning, don't even get up until like 10 a.m. I basically tail between my legs, not stoked on life. I was like, oh, the elk won't be like rutting in the morning. Like, what's even the point? At noon, I was like, okay, get up, just go for a little walk. You've got to leave this evening anyway, so like just go take the bow for a walk. Yeah, I'm right above my camp, just walking down this ridge, and all of a sudden antlers pop up. I'm walking down this real kind of knife bladey ridge, and this elk just boop, he's walking right up the ridge, and we're doing this. And as soon as I see him, obviously I stop. That bull just keeps coming. He gets to 3 yards, and at this point I'm already at full draw, and he's walking with his head down. And he's just he's gonna walk right into me. He's gonna hit me with his antlers, and who knows what's gonna happen. Kind of out of fear, I don't know, but I was like, oh, I need to make a noise and let this thing know that there's something in his trail. And so I'm at full draw, and I just go, meh, and he stops and he lifts his head up, and at 3 yards, I was very confident taking the frontal shot. And so I shot him right in the soft spot, right in his chest, frontal. That bull, he spins around, he runs 20 yards, then he stops, and blood spraying everywhere. He runs another maybe 50, and I watched him just tip over. The takeaway there is that definitely you got to pay attention to the moon phase. When there's a full moon, even if morning and evening hunt might be slow, take the bow out for a midday walk, because often those animals will be up on their feet. midday.